22 years ago, Rwanda was on its knees. In the wake of the 1994 genocide, hundreds of thousands were dead, many more were fleeing, and government services were non-existent. But from economic growth rates of negative 11.4 in 1994 to positive 6.9 in 2015, the East African nation has proved both bookmakers and the world wrong. And now in 2016, the country is welcoming the world's top financial minds for the 2016 Economic Forum on Africa in the capital, Kigali. So where to next for this landlocked nation of less than 12 million people? And what lessons can the rest of Africa take away from Rwanda's economic miracle? I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. Now, 20 years after Rwanda's genocide, the country has been transformed to one of the most successful and competitive economies in Africa. CCTV's Robert Nagila traveled to the country to find out what lies behind Rwanda's economic success.
From a fragile economic base destroyed during the 1994 genocide, Rwanda has risen from the ashes like the proverbial phoenix. Ranked high in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index and with a strong reputation for low corruption, Rwanda today boasts one of the strongest economic growth rates on the continent. Rwanda has undertaken a series of pro-investment policy reforms, making it an investment destination of choice. Part of this success can be attributed to the establishment in 2006 of a special economic zone. Henry Wei, the general manager of China Star, a construction company operating within the zone, says he's never regretted choosing Rwanda.
The very important thing is about the rule of Rwanda, because when we came here, we know there are very good investment for the foreign companies. And second is about the security. The security here is very good.
The chief operating officer of Rwanda Development Board outlines the dividends the reform program has yielded.
Rwanda is an attractive investment destination for two reasons. One, we have the most competitive regulatory framework in Africa, the second best place to do business in Africa. And we have done everything possible to facilitate investments. You can register within 6 hours your business. We have also done reforms that are going beyond doing business. For example, we are one of the best places in Africa to be a woman, the safest place to work at night, and the fourth most competitive government in terms of government efficiency.
Finance Minister Clever Gatete puts the efficiency down to performance contracts for all civil servants.
The performance contracts are really measuring ourselves so that the whole system works in an efficient way. And also we had to make sure that we are accountable for every penny, maximum out of every penny that is invested in our own economy. Yeah, so there has been quite a lot in addition to the normal ways of doing business.
But Rwanda's economy isn't without its challenges. The private sector is still largely informal, and better infrastructure and lack of access to electricity are some of the major constraints to private investment. Robert Nagela, CCTV, Kigali, Rwanda.
Now, Rwanda's long-term development goals are defined in a strategy entitled Vision 2020. The strategy seeks to transform the country from a low-income agricultural-based economy to a knowledge-based, service-oriented economy with a middle-income country status by 2020. We sat down with the country's Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, the Honorable Clever Gatete, to find out how Rwanda plans to achieve their economic goals.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. I'll begin with, what can the rest of Africa learn from Rwanda's economic rising?
I don't know if that's the right question because we keep learning from each other. I don't think there is any country that has gone through economic transformation just dependent on domestic way of transforming the economies. Because as a growing economy, we're always interdependent with each other. But I think what happened here in Rwanda and what has been very, very instrumental in terms of driving our transformation is, number one, is leadership. A leadership that has a clear vision, a leadership that has a clear strategy, direction, a leadership that is looking at inclusive development. Not only the GDP growth, but also how that growth reflects in terms of satisfying the basic needs of ordinary people, and where all the people are also engaged in the entire development process. So the leadership has been very critical. Then number two, there has been so many innovations. We realize that actually doing business as usual, collecting revenues from taxes or development partners, investing, the classical way of investing is not sufficient. So we had to make sure that we innovate so that you can achieve more with less. And that's why there have been many, many examples of how we supplement our own budget, even including the public works where we work for free but contributing as a community, but also using different ways that we have put in place to make sure that we can improve efficiency and also use our own culture, our own tradition, our own way of doing things to make sure that we can perform.
And just how can Rwanda attain sustainable growth against a background of economic slowdown across the African continent?
Yeah, of course, that's what exactly we are doing. We are realizing that actually the many shocks as an open economy, we are completely integrated, and meaning that actually we have to do much more and in terms of diversifying. It's not only diversifying in terms of markets, which is very, very important. Traditional Rwandan products were going to Europe. And now you can see most of it going to Asia, going to America, going to the Middle East, and also going to other African countries. But what we are also seeing in terms of diversifying also is making sure that what we send outside is not just raw commodities, it's just a value addition. And that's why, of course, if you see the commodities like minerals have been hard hit because of the low demand in China. And we've seen that actually for us to be able to export and get value for that for the exports is to make sure that we add value, but also to go beyond the traditional exports. We've been exporting minerals, the coffee, the tea, but now we find that actually what contributes to growth can be something else. We are now, for example, looking at the secondary cities. The cities, if they are well organized, if they are well invested, and you put everything that's needed, and it is well connected, the pole of growth for our own economies. But also we see that in terms of diversification, we want to take the entire region as a buffer, meaning that actually regional integration becomes a very, very important aspect for all of us. With that region that is well integrated, for a population that is now more than 160 million people of East African Community region, including South Sudan, this becomes a big market. If it was well interconnected, if there is a free movement of people, if the financial systems are well connected, the capital markets are well connected, this becomes a big market for us.
Now, the World Economic Forum is coming to Rwanda. Just how can the country use this opportunity to showcase what it has to offer investors?
Yeah, thank you very much. World Economic Forum indeed taking place here on the 11th to 13th is actually for the whole of Africa, including Rwanda. And here Rwanda also we look at it within the context of the region. We've been working together as a team. And here we showcase exactly what we are able to do, what we have done. One is the tourism sector, which you mentioned, the service sector, and tourism becoming a big part of it. And here we have introduced a system, they call it MICE, which is really all the meetings and conferences here being really trying to see what makes them, right from the airport and the airline, to the hotels, to the transport system, to the IT, to the services, and other things. The efficiency of how things are done to make sure that we can continuously improve in terms of serving our clients as a country that is looking forward to becoming a conference center and also, of course, in addition to the tourism and other kind of activities that serve them. But we want to make sure that all the services are there. From the airport, the way you are cleared, because you don't need a visa, you don't get a visa at the airport from anywhere in on the African continent. And then when you enter any means of transport, then you have the fastest technology that you can have, the 4G, in any bus, in any truck, in any taxi that you can get. In the hotel, you get the super services that you can get. And that is really something that we want to make sure that the tourism side is really profiled. But also Rwanda has invested heavily, as you mentioned, the service sector. Our vision is to become a middle-income country, but also to become a service sector-led, with technology, with IT becoming a very critical element. We've been investing in it since the year 2000, and now it is starting to yield really significant benefits. So now having our resources being transformed by digital becomes very, very critical. We want to show our digital village, if you want to call it a special economic zone, where we have over 60 hectares of land, where we have all the various institutions. The Carnegie Mellon University is there. The African Institute of Mathematics and Science is going to be located there. Other 4 centers of excellence will be there in almost all other areas. We are also getting the young Rwandan innovators also in that area. We are establishing a fund, innovations fund, that is going to help in terms of driving it. We are encouraging, and there are some companies that have already started, like Positivo, the IT companies trying to produce from here. So we are going to put the whole package together and say, this can work for Africa. You know, if it has worked elsewhere, it can work for Rwanda, because you have the companies for production, you have the IT infrastructure, you have the research and technology, you have the innovation, you have everything. So it can work in Africa and be able to help other sectors, from agriculture to industry to anything. And that's what we want to make sure, that really this one comes very, very clearly, that technology can actually become a very, very big engine of economic transformation. Thank you. Thank you so much, Asante Sana.
We're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, I'll be joined by expert guests to help make more sense of Rwanda's economic miracle. To stay with us. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Now, to help further unpack Rwanda's miraculous economic transformation, I have expert guests standing by. In Nairobi, Professor Michael Chege, advisor at the Kenyan Ministry of Planning and National Development. In Beijing, Ambassador Xu San. He's China's former ambassador to Rwanda and Eritrea. And with me here in High Commissioner to Kenya, Ambassador James Kimonyo. Thank you all for joining in this conversation. Professor Chege, I'll start off with you on this. Rwanda's economic growth just under 8% over the last couple of years. It is one of the world's fastest growing economies today. That turnaround having been achieved since 1994. What do you attribute, though, the social and economic progress in the last 20 years?
Good leadership, more than anything else. The leadership of President Paul Kagame, the genocide, and clear focus about the direction he wanted to take the country, and technocratic staff around him who have been responsible for crafting the Vision 2030, the medium-term plans, and a clear focus on how to do things. But more importantly for Rwanda, near total absence of corruption, which plagues most African countries and most developing countries, and efficiency in public administration. Those are the factors that explain why Rwanda is what it is. Ambassador
Kimonyo, you can shed light on this for us. What have been the government strategies that have taken that economy from negative growth to, at some point, 13%? And how has it been guiding that economy through all those changes?
Let me say that as Rwandans, we are very proud of what we have done in terms of transforming the country. I should say maybe we are not very happy because we still want to do more to transform our country. But I understand why people call it a miracle transformation. It's because we really started from a very, very low base. There was nothing left after the genocide. We had to put together pieces to be able to build this country. And as the Professor mentioned, our president, who led the revolution, the liberation, had to deal with, first and foremost, security of the country, and at the same time deal with the reconciliation, because our society had been divided for many, many years. And from that point, we had to draw a roadmap on how then we transform the country, because after we secured the country, it's peaceful, people are going into the process of reconciliation. What do we do then to make sure that people improve their livelihoods? And then we came up with the vision 2020, 6 years later after the genocide, which has different pillars that have been guiding us in terms of what we have achieved in the last 22 years.
We're going to look at your roadmap in just a moment, but I want to get Ambassador Shu's experience here, because you have been a former ambassador to Rwanda. In your view, though, what makes Rwanda a success story?
I think the most important thing is that they find their own homegrown solutions. I think this is the main reason for its success. Although it tried to learn some others, but however, they would adapt this experience of the foreign countries to the exactly realities of the Rwanda itself. And also, I think they are using a very good vehicle. That is, they're using the Rwanda historical heritage or the tradition, so that to make everybody in a country understand what they are going to do. So it is very easy for them to get the consensus.
Right. Ambassador Kimonyo, Ambassador Shu has talked about these homegrown solutions that Rwanda has undertaken. What are those homegrown innovations? Why did Rwanda undertake homegrown solutions as opposed to following in the developmental models of other African countries?
You know, in the aftermath of genocide, we were faced with enormous challenges in many, many different ways. Just starting with what the ambassador mentioned, in terms of justice. After the genocide, after losing 1 million people, we had a lot of perpetrators who participated in the genocide. And the class court system that was supposed to deliver justice for the victims and the perpetrators was very, very slow. It was actually estimated that if you were to deal with more than 200,000 perpetrators, it was going to take more than 200 years to deal with them in a usual classic conventional court system. Then the Gacaca court came into existence because that is a system that was used by Rwandese to deal with, handle disputes in terms of conflict resolution. And this system came into existence, and we put in place laws to govern it. And in that process, we were able to deliver justice to actually to try more than 1.2 million, perpetrators of genocide or people who participated in genocide. Otherwise, if without that solution, we are not going to be able to reconcile people and deliver justice to the victims, but at the same time, deliver justice to the perpetrators. So that's one solution. But we have had other things. For instance, when we talk about, maybe we'll talk about it later, in terms of economic transformation.
Right.
The Umuganda, which is a community, participation, where people participate every end of the month to do a community work in terms of building bridges, roads, and doing other things that they cost a lot of money from the government. So we have adopted some of these solutions to be able to address challenges that would otherwise take many, many years to be able to be addressed by the usual system in terms of financing, in terms of legal processes. So I think some of these solutions, the Abunzi, which is the community, elders who sit down and resolve conflicts instead of going to the court process. We have done a lot of those things to be able to address to address some of those challenges. For instance, the Ubudehe, which is a contribution that's done by the community to support people who are poor in their communities, which will take time for these people to get any whatever loan from the bank or any support from the government. The people do it from their own communities to help people who are poor to be able to get out of poverty.
Professor Shege, I want to draw you in, though, in terms of the economic models that Rwanda has been pursuing. And just in 2005, it was ranked the first globally in terms of using ICT. It has also been ranked as the third in Africa in terms of its report on the ease of doing business. What stands out for you, though, Professor Shege, in terms of economic or business reforms that Rwanda has undertaken? What stands out for you as being one of the biggest single innovations that has had huge impact?
Well, Rwanda today has got the best doing business record in all of Africa, and it competes with some of the most advanced countries in Africa. They have learned that if you really want to attract business, you've got to be, first of all, efficient in the number of days it takes to register a company, which in Rwanda is just a matter of a few days. You don't bribe people to connect electricity or water, or to process licenses and that sort of thing. All of that is done in record time, and they've used ICT to facilitate this, done deliberately. Clearly, the model here is that of the Southeast Asian countries. Make it easy for people to do business. Your own people to start with, but also foreigners coming to your country to do business. That is why they rank so well. And I believe also efficiency in the public sector, so that people get services from government when it is due and when it's wanted. In a way, you look at the indicators of how long it takes to deliver services to the people, and Rwanda ranks very well in that respect.
Ambassador Kimonyo, such a short time, but so much has been achieved. How have you done it?
I think what the government did was to undertake a lot of reforms in terms of removing especially non-tariff barriers, because it will cost nothing to reduce the time it takes for someone to register a company by just employing ICT, as the professor mentioned, but also reducing bureaucracy within the system. It is for this reason that the government decided to create what we call Rwanda Development Board, whereby an investor comes in, instead of running up and down going to different institutions, you come to RDB, and then you present your proposal, then the registration and all in the same building by the people who represent the government from different institutions, and then it takes a short time for you to register. And also there are other things that we have done in terms of doing reforms, in terms of land registry, in terms of work permits, in terms of visas, that will make easier for you to come in Rwanda and do business. And I think what is most important is that you do it, but also allow a situation where all the institutions buy into that idea of facilitating all the investors to make sure that when it is easily converted into actual investment.
All right. Ambassador Shu, though, in terms of boosting investor confidence and in terms of attracting investment into Rwanda, as you look at the reforms that Rwanda has undertaken and those homegrown solutions, are there issues that you feel African countries can borrow from Rwanda?
I think at least all the countries, including China, could learn from Rwanda examples that you have to focus on improvement of, or what we call it, the social economic development of your own nation, and try to have this strong commitment, and try to include all the citizens to participate. And another strong point I think we can learn is that you have to constantly adjust your existing policies so that you can keep in pace with the times.
All right. I want to come back to one of your economic models that you're following, and Rwanda has mentioned previously that it wants to be the Singapore of Africa, and of course Rwanda has also been following the development of the Southeast Asian countries. Which models are you following? What are you borrowing from the Southeast Asian economies?
Well, I should say that well, we are not trying to be the Singapore of Africa. We are trying to get where we want to get in terms of building our country. But I should say that in the aftermath of genocide, and faced with all these challenges, we had to figure out which type of economic model that we're going to follow. And then we had to buy from best practices around the world, particularly in Asia, Singapore inclusive, Mauritius also, and other countries, to be able to come up with a blend of one of the economic models that is going to make sure that we get to where we want to get. Because remember, it has been proven that the higher forms of growth are not necessarily based on natural resources. There are other forms of growth, especially investing in human capital. And I think that's why you say Rwanda is going to be a knowledge-based economy, and therefore the country has, the government has decided to invest heavily into human capital development.
Ambassador Shu, are there models, though, are there opportunities that between Rwanda and China, now that China's economy is changing from moving from manufacturing to a services and consumer, a private sector-led economy? Are there opportunities here for Rwanda?
I think there are a lot, and also there are also opportunities for the Chinese enterprises either to develop themselves abroad or learn some good examples from abroad as well. And these fields, I think, either in the infrastructure, agriculture, and manufacture, and there are a lot. But however, any enterprises from outside, including the Chinese one, they should not go into Rwanda with the only one plan they thought it is to the need, because you have to find out what really need on the ground, and you have to align your own things with the development plan of the Rwanda.
Rwanda is going to be hosting the World Economic Forum. What's the significance of that for you?
I think this comes at the time when we all need to sit together and see how we can revolutionize our economies through technologies. And I think the theme is very clear in terms of how we are going to use ICT and technology to be able to transform the African economy and the global economy. And so Rwanda will be very placed in a very good position to be able to share our own experience in terms of how we invested in ICT and how this has really, improved our economy and how it has made Rwanda to be what it is today. And so that will be a very good platform for Rwandans, for the continent and for the world to share our own experiences and figure out what we're going to do as the next phase to be able to transform the economy of our country, the continent and the world over.
Professor Shege, you have the final word on this. What next for Rwanda?
Well, if you look at the Rwanda Vision 2020, the idea clearly is to make a jump from a predominantly agricultural country to one in which is private sector driven, but with emphasis on the service sector, overlapping manufacturing. That is why ICT, the service sector, knowledge-based economy is being emphasized in that country. I think Rwanda's biggest drawback is being landlocked. And one must hope that the Standard Gauge Railway will get to Kigali sooner than later, as well as the oil pipeline, so that the transit time from Kigali for goods, Kigali to Mombasa or Dar es Salaam or wherever it may be, will be a lot shorter and less costly than it is at the moment. We wait to see how a service-based economy is going to prosper in that country. But let us also not forget that Rwanda is a member of the East African community now, and a very active member at that. So what is going to happen in future in Rwanda will depend on the market in East Africa, which is now available to Rwanda, which wasn't the case before, and especially in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And we hope that Rwanda's participation in the East African economy will help grow the Rwandan economy, as well as Rwanda's targeting of the global market.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your insights. And that's all we have time for this week. But thanks to my guests for their insights. In Nairobi, Professor Michael Shege, he's an advisor at the Kenyan Ministry of Planning and National Development. In Beijing, Ambassador Xu San, he's China's former ambassador to Rwanda and Eritrea. And with me here in studio is Rwanda's High Commissioner to Kenya, Ambassador James Kimonyo. Remember, you can join the conversation online through Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And to join us again next week for another edition of Africa. Goodbye.